Scooby-Doo is a series that needs no introduction. What began as a Saturday morning cartoon intended to soothe parents and networks alike has mutated into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Films, spin-offs, merchandise, memes, it's an animated franchise with the undead persistence of a horror movie villain. Like most franchises, it has died, repeatedly, publicly, and messily. Cancellations, revamps, reimaginings, some noble, some catastrophic. It's been lifted up, dumbed down, made edgy, made toddler-friendly, turned into live-action, musical theatre, Lego, CGI, and it always gets back up, always stumbling forward with the tenacity of something that refuses to stay buried, even when it should have, even when people begged it to, even when it was reduced to a glorified guest star in its own franchise. But like all massive franchises, it had to start somewhere. The first episode, What a Night for a Night, first aired in 1969. The world was changing, television was evolving, and in the middle of this cultural molting, Hanna-Barbera unleashed something deceptively simple. A talking dog, a mystery, and a formula. And somehow that formula has outlasted everything around it. The birth of Scooby-Doo was not divine inspiration, it was desperation. In the late 1960s, parent-led advocacy groups were cracking down on violence in children's programming. Saturday mornings had become a battlefield, and networks were searching for safe, inoffensive alternatives. CBS executive Fred Silverman commissioned Hanna-Barbera to develop a new series that would be part mystery, part comedy, and most importantly, free from anything that could be seen as controversial. He turned to young writers Joe Ruby and Ken Spears to develop a concept. The initial pitch was titled Mysteries 5 and was a story about a teenage band who solved supernatural crimes in between sets accompanied by their bongo-playing dog named Too Much. After many rejected versions and network notes, the series shapeshifted. The band became a gang of amateur sleuths, Too Much was renamed Scooby-Doo, and the focus fully shifted to mystery solving. When Ruby and Spears first presented the show, CBS executives found the ghostly concept art too frightening for kids and initially passed. Not willing to give up the mystery show, Silverman asked the team to retool it with more comedy and less horror. They toned down the scares and spotlighted the goofy dog and his pal Shaggy. The show was christened Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, and CBS greenlit it for the fall of 1969. And with that, the formula was forged. A monster, a red herring, a hallway chase, a trap, a reveal, rinse, repeat. It's timeless. The mix of humour, mild scares, and a really catchy theme song was a ratings winner from the start. The show ran for 2 seasons from 1969 to 1970, and Hanna-Barbera and CBS looked for ways to keep that momentum going. In 1972, the gang returned in an expanded format called the New Scooby-Doo Movies. It was an hour-long show featuring celebrity guest stars every episode. These crossover adventures paired Mystery Inc. with famous faces like Batman and Robin, the Harlem Globetrotters, and Don Knotts. This gimmick gave Scooby-Doo a meta, almost tongue-in-cheek quality. The characters mingled with real celebrities and other cartoon characters, reflecting the show's growing cultural footprint. After 2 seasons of these guest star team-ups, CBS went back to airing reruns, and by 1976, the franchise was on the move to a new network. When Fred Silverman left CBS in 1975 to become president of ABC, he made sure to bring Scooby-Doo along. New episodes began airing on ABC, and the show underwent frequent format tweaks on the new network. Scooby-Doo was packaged with other cartoons in blocks, like the Scooby-Doo and Dynamite Hour and Laugh Olympics. It introduced Scooby's dim-witted cousin Scooby-Dum as a recurring character in some mysteries. Through these changes, the core Scooby-Doo formula remained popular. But by the late 1970s, the network felt that the franchise was growing too formulaic, and the show was beginning to spin its wheels. Format fatigue was setting in, and behind the scenes the writers were struggling to come up with fresh fake ghost plots after so many episodes. Every spooky scenario had already been done. Ratings were slipping, and ABC executives began murmuring about possibly cancelling Scooby-Doo. The franchise was at risk of vanishing like a phantom, until an unlikely hero stepped in. In 1979, the team made a strategic decision that would change Scooby-Doo forever, a decision that still causes arguments in the fanbase 50 years later. They introduced Scooby's brash, puppy nephew Scrappy-Doo. It's a name that still sends shudders down spines to this day. This new character was conceived explicitly to boost the show's faltering ratings and stave off cancellation threats. The network executives had essentially given Scooby-Doo an ultimatum: add something new or get off the air. It was an act of desperation masquerading as reinvention, and it did work. The idea was that Scrappy's energy would inject something new into the show while keeping the beloved mystery comedy setup intact. The introduction of the character succeeded in renewing audience interest, so much so that ABC ordered more episodes and kept Scooby-Doo on the air. Scrappy was wildly popular the first few years he was on the scene, and he bolstered the ratings and kept the series going a good 2 to 3 years longer than it might have lasted otherwise. A new show titled Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo revitalized the franchise, and it proved that the show could adapt. However, this change also marked a turning point in the show's style. They overhauled the format, and Fred, Daphne, and Velma were dropped from the main cast, and Scooby, Shaggy, and Scrappy continued as a trio. The episodes also shifted from the classic single-story mysteries to a series of short 7-minute comedic segments, emphasizing gags and the Scooby-Scrappy shenanigans over the intricate whodunits. Many of these early shorts even featured actual supernatural creatures instead of masked crooks, essentially abandoning the unmasking trope for a while. Scrappy-Doo remains a polarizing figure. Later generations of fans would come to loathe him to the point that the 2002 movie revealed him as the villain. But it's undeniable that Scrappy saved the franchise at a critical moment. His arrival demonstrated a key lesson that would define the franchise going forward. When the old formula got stale, the series was willing to reinvent itself, even at the risk of upsetting some purists. This flexibility would be crucial in the decades to come. The 1980s were a strange time for Scooby-Doo, and the franchise tried out some radical format changes. With Fred, Velma, and Daphne absent from 1980 to 1983, the mysteries got wackier. Scooby and Shaggy, often accompanied by Scrappy, found themselves teaming up with an eclectic cast of new characters in various versions of the show. These changes were sometimes jarring. The familiar Mystery Inc. team was missing, making the Scooby-Doo series of the 80s feel like a different beast altogether. By mid-decade, they attempted to correct course. In 1983, Daphne was brought back into the fold, and the show returned to a proper mystery format under new titles like The New Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo Show and The New Scooby-Doo Mysteries. The most notable experiment came in 1985 with the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. The series was a drastic departure. It had an overarching storyline in which Scooby, Shaggy, Daphne, Scrappy, and a newly added character named Flim Flam travelled the world to recapture evil ghosts that had been accidentally released. To help guide them, the show even enlisted horror icon Vincent Price as the voice of Vincent Van Ghoul, a paranormal expert. For the first time, Scooby-Doo was featuring truly supernatural enemies that weren't just people in masks. It was a bold move for a franchise built on fake monsters. But the tone was lighter and more fantastic, with 2 goofy ghosts causing mischief and plenty of humour. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is remembered as one of the weirdest and oddest incarnations, and it only ran for 1 season. In 1986, the show was cancelled before they even captured all 13 ghosts. The storyline wouldn't even be wrapped up until a direct-to-video movie resolved it decades later. With this show's cancellation, for the first time since 1969, there were no new Scooby-Doo episodes airing on Saturday mornings. After a 17-year continuous run, the franchise finally hit pause on TV. ABC filled the slot with reruns packaged under Scooby's Mystery Funhouse, but it seemed like the Mystery Inc. gang may finally have run out of gas. The rest of the decade was a wilderness of television movies. The Boo Brothers, Ghoul School, Reluctant Werewolf, each was more absurd than the last, dragging the characters through monster car races, supernatural academies, and inexplicable transformations. These specials did keep the lights on, but just barely, and each one felt more like a contractual obligation than a creative choice. By the time A Pup Named Scooby-Doo arrived in 1988, the franchise was on life support. It was infantilized, sanitized, and creatively deflated. It was cute and it was watchable, but it wasn't alive. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo was a fresh reboot that reimagined the characters as preteens solving mysteries in their hometown. It was a clever strategy to renew interest. It tapped into the late 80s trend of baby versions of characters, like the Muppets babies. It introduced Scooby-Doo to a whole new generation of viewers. It adopted a distinctly cartoony, energetic style heavily influenced by classic Looney Tunes, and it was far more exaggerated and zany than any of the other series. The junior versions of Shaggy, Daphne, Velma, and Fred fit perfectly in with this sillier tone, with running gags that kids quickly latched onto. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo was a ratings success, and it ran for 3 solid seasons until 1991. It showed that the Scooby Gang was versatile enough to thrive even when transplanted into a new age range and style. By making the franchise younger, they managed to extend its life at a time when the classic formula had run its course. Many 80s and 90s kids have fond memories of a pup named Scooby-Doo as their gateway to the franchise. It kept Scooby-Doo in the public eye through the end of the 1980s and bridged the gap until the next evolution. When A Pup Named Scooby-Doo ended in 1991, the franchise went dormant in terms of new TV episodes. But Scooby-Doo was far from gone. Throughout the early 1990s, reruns aired widely on cable channels. A whole new generation of kids were discovering the old episodes this way, and the nostalgic appeal of the gang's adventures began to grow. By the mid-1990s, Scooby-Doo was one of Cartoon Network's most popular syndicated shows, proving that the formula still had wide appeal. This popularity caught the attention of the franchise's new corporate owners, Warner Brothers, which by the late 1990s controlled Hanna-Barbera, and they saw an opportunity to create new content. The result was a major strategic reboot, not on TV, but again in the direct-to-video market. In 1998, Scooby and his friends starred in a brand new animated movie, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, and it was unlike any Scooby adventure before. The film reunited the classic lineup of Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy and Scooby, but this time as adults, with a darker, more cinematic story. The monsters this time were real. Zombie Island found the gang facing actual zombies, voodoo cat creatures, and genuinely frightening situations. It was a bold break from the old man in the mask routine. The tone was darker, the animation was gorgeous, fluid and haunting. The voice acting had weight, and they even managed to land stars like Adrienne Barbeau. The tone was still lightened by humour and Scooby-Doo antics, but the stakes were higher, and the horror elements were more intense than Saturday mornings had ever allowed. Fans both old and new loved it, and many credit Zombie Island with reviving the Scooby-Doo franchise from the creative lull of the 1980s. The film was praised as one of the best Scooby stories, and importantly, it showed that the franchise could grow up and still be successful. But Zombie Island wasn't just a success, it was a statement. Scooby-Doo could evolve, and from that point on, it refused to die, for better or worse. Following the success of Zombie Island, Warner Brothers released a string of direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movies every year. These movies continued to experiment. They introduced new recurring characters like the Hex Girls, and mixed genuine supernatural threats with the classic humour. It proved that Scooby-Doo could be updated for contemporary audiences. By the end of the 1990s, Scooby-Doo had cemented a full-fledged comeback. The character was hot property again, and it set the stage for a return to television and the leap to live-action film. Scooby-Doo hit the big screen in a live-action Hollywood feature film in 2002. The movie took a self-aware approach to the Scooby mythology. It starred Matthew Lillard, Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Linda Cardellini, and the film mixed goofy humour with a few cheeky adult nods. Critics were mixed, but the movie proved that there was a major audience interest in Scooby-Doo as a pop culture icon. It got a sequel in 2004 and re-established Mystery Inc. into the public consciousness. The live-action adaptation also hinted at something important. Many of those who grew up with Scooby-Doo were now adults, and they still cared. If generations of fans had grown up with Scooby-Doo, why couldn't Scooby-Doo grow up with them too? The early 2000s also saw the first Scooby-Doo TV series in over a decade. Warner Brothers Animation produced What's New Scooby-Doo. As the title suggests, What's New Scooby-Doo updated the formula for the 21st century. After years of spin-offs and Scrappy, the show brought back the original 5 members of Mystery Inc. to solve weekly mysteries. It dropped the characters squarely into the 2000s. They now used laptops and cell phones, and episodes featured modern settings and references from shopping malls to roller coasters, and had an all-new theme song by Simple Plan. It was the classic Scooby-Doo format revived. It was the first time since 1978 that a series had had the full original lineup of characters tackling hoaxes in the old style, but with contemporary polish with digital animation and updated humour. What's New Scooby-Doo enjoyed a healthy run and introduced Scooby-Doo to millennials, proving that the traditional mystery format still worked in a new era. The franchise experimented again in 2006 with Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. The series dramatically shifted focus to just Scooby and Shaggy in a more farcical Adventure of the Week setup. Fred, Daphne and Velma were mostly sidelined, and Get a Clue played like a buddy comedy. It was even pitched as a Dumb and Dumber style take on Scooby and Shaggy's friendship. The art style was simplified and quirky, and was deliberately designed to set the show apart from other incarnations. Many fans missed the full gang, and Get a Clue wasn't universally beloved, but it still demonstrated the franchise's willingness to try new comedic angles to stay relevant. Warner Brothers was clearly targeting a younger Saturday morning audience with slapstick humour, responding to mid-2000s trends in cartoons. This constant ability to refresh the format, even if every experiment wasn't a success, kept Scooby-Doo in the Saturday morning lineup and in the cultural conversation. Each new incarnation seemed to want to be the one, the revival, the redefinition, the fresh take, and some of them were. In 2010, Scooby-Doo made one of its boldest leaps yet with the launch of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. This series is often hailed as a high point in the franchise. It took the familiar characters and settings but placed them in a serialized, story arc-driven format, essentially treating the show as an adventure drama with an ongoing narrative. Mystery Incorporated wove a surprisingly rich storyline and dove into the personal lives of the characters in ways that past incarnations hadn't. Critics and fans praised Mystery Incorporated for the smart writing and ambitious scope. By embracing a darker, more lore-heavy approach, the series showed that Scooby-Doo could still grow with its audience and compete with modern animated dramas. It was considered a full-on reboot in its own alternate universe continuity, which gave the writers freedom to reinvent backstories and villains while still paying tribute to the classic tropes. This incarnation demonstrated that even after 40 years, Scooby-Doo could still surprise audiences and garner critical acclaim by breaking the mold. In the catalogue of Scooby-Doo shows, Mystery Incorporated stands out as the creative pinnacle. It's proof that reinvention can elevate the franchise to new heights. Following Mystery Incorporated, the franchise didn't rest for long. In 2015, Be Cool Scooby-Doo debuted on Cartoon Network, and once again the pendulum swung towards comedy. Be Cool Scooby-Doo featured a radical new art style, a simplified, almost caricatured look that some liken to Family Guy, with lanky, exaggerated character designs. This visual change initially faced some pushback from fans who were startled to see their beloved characters in such a cartoony form. But those who gave it a chance found that Be Cool Scooby-Doo was actually one of the franchise's funniest and most imaginative installments. The show leaned heavily into the comedy, it poked fun at Scooby-Doo cliches and played up the character quirks. This version of Daphne is delightfully eccentric, and she adopts a new oddball hobby or persona in every episode. The self-aware humour and snappy dialogue made Be Cool Scooby-Doo a cult favourite for some, and it showed that Scooby-Doo could still laugh at itself and feel fresh. It was a new look and a new tone, but it was still Scooby-Doo at heart. Soon after that, the franchise returned to an old idea, partnering with celebrity guest stars. Scooby-Doo and Guess Who launched in 2019 as a tribute to the 1970s new Scooby-Doo movies. Every episode featured the gang teaming up with a different celebrity or fictional character, from Wonder Woman and Batman to real-life stars like Mark Hamill. The throwback formula proved to be a fun way to mix nostalgia with novelty, bringing Scooby into contact with modern pop culture icons. It was more proof that the franchise could circle back to earlier concepts and successfully reinvent them for a new era. In the age of crossovers and mashups, Scooby-Doo and Guess Who fit right in, giving both young viewers and older fans something to enjoy. During all this, Scooby-Doo continued to thrive in direct-to-video movies throughout the years. They released 1 or 2 a year, in an endless onslaught of adventures ranging from quirky crossovers to seasonally themed mysteries. The movies often tried to experiment. Scooby-Doo and Batman the Brave and the Bold paired them with superheroes, and the WrestleMania mystery plunged them into the world of pro wrestling. But some people started to feel that the promise of Zombie Island was being wasted. The stakes were shrinking again, and the tone had softened. Monsters had gone back to being just people in masks. That formula that had once been brilliantly subverted was re-entrenched like a bad habit. Any chance at true evolution was neutered by the franchise's own fear of alienating the past. It started to regress and retreated into the very patterns that had nearly killed it before. The franchise almost became too self-aware, to the point of being a parody of itself. So many callbacks and nods and references to its roots became so exhausting that most people began to wonder why they weren't just watching the older content instead. Even when the writing was better and the animation budgets rose, the mystery formula became claustrophobic. And what was worse, it became self-aware, and the franchise began to lampshade itself to death with its references to its older content. In 2020, Warner Bros. Released Scoob, a computer-animated theatrical film that reimagined how the gang first met and set up a broader Hanna-Barbera crossover universe. Scoob received mixed reviews, but it showed the brand's ability to play on the big stage with cutting-edge CGI animation to a new generation of young viewers. The most radical departure came in 2023 with the series Velma, which put a very adult-oriented spin on the Scooby-Doo universe. This series focused on Velma and presented a meta-satirical take on the teen mystery genre. It featured mature humour, violence, and no actual Scooby-Doo present. Velma is a very controversial show. Most people felt that it completely missed the mark and was a stain on the franchise. But its mere existence underscores just how far the franchise's influence reaches. A 54-year-old children's cartoon property daring to reinvent itself as an adult comedy is practically unheard of, and it speaks of the franchise's iconic status that creators are still finding new angles to explore, even if not every experiment lands. The fact that Scooby-Doo can inspire such a wide spectrum of content, from gentle preschool cartoons to edgy parodies, shows the breadth of its cultural impact. And of course, the core Scooby-Doo format continues alongside these experiments. Reruns of the classic episode are perpetually on the air around the world, introducing new children to the timeless thrill of the spooky mysteries. Scooby-Doo's even made special appearances, such as a well-received crossover with Supernatural in 2018. It all further cements his status as a pop culture touchstone. Looking back at the journey of Scooby-Doo, one thing is clear: reinvention. Again and again, the franchise survived periods of uncertainty by adapting to the times. In 1969, the show was created as a way of sidestepping violence and adding comedy. In 1979, it was the bold addition of Scrappy-Doo that kept the series from cancellation. In the 1980s, it meant reimagining the gang as children to appeal to a younger demographic. The 1990s saw Scooby-Doo embrace real supernatural horror, revitalizing him for older children and nostalgic adults. Every decade, Scooby-Doo manages to pivot, whether through format changes, new characters, stylistic overhauls, or media platforms. It always finds a way to stay relevant. Apart from the odd misstep, Scooby-Doo never strayed so far that it lost its identity. The basic concept of a group of friends unmasking villains is a durable foundation that each new version could build upon. This balance of familiarity and novelty kept audiences comforted and curious. It also helped that the characters became iconic and lovable. From Shaggy's goofy cowardice to Velma's nerdy smarts, they became instantly recognizable figures around the world. Catchphrases like Jinkies, Zoinks, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo entered the pop culture lexicon. Even those who've never seen an episode know what you mean by meddling kids. In 2013, TV Guide ranked Scooby-Doo in the top 5 greatest cartoons of all time, a testament to its enduring appeal and cross-generational popularity. Scooby-Doo has become immortal, and now it lives in a limbo of eternal reanimation. It's not quite dead, but it's still not quite alive again. The franchise has weathered dramatic shifts in audience tastes, from the psychedelic 1960s to the digital 2020s. It stayed flexible in its format, from campy to serious, hand-drawn and CGI, network TV and streaming, but it always comes back to the lovable Great Dane and his mystery-solving friends. There's a Scooby-Doo show for everyone, and that's one of the big reasons the franchise endures. If one version isn't your cup of tea, another will come along, bringing with it a fresh take on the gang's escapades. But for all its absurdities and incarnations, when it began, the show was shockingly modest. There was no sweeping mythology, no high-concept ambition, just a suit of armor, a missing professor, and a gang of teenagers poking around. But it worked. This crude, economically animated 30-minute ghost story laid the foundation for a cultural empire. It didn't need to be perfect. It had atmosphere, a hook, characters that would become iconic. The animation may stutter and the design at times may be aggressive, but it did one thing that a lot of pilots never do. It stuck. Quite frankly, it's wild. This unassuming little monster mystery, barely stitched together and airing in the graveyard slot of Saturday morning cartoons, gave birth to a franchise that would define a genre. A franchise that has refused time and again to fade away. There's a strange poetry in that. Something enduring, something persistent, something so Scooby-Doo. But it all began with one Saturday morning cartoon, with a knight, a truck, a crate, and a question. Scooby-Doo, where are you? Apparently, he's everywhere. Forever.